Good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. This is Boris Johnson bringing you your latest edition of Ask Boris on LBC. I'm here for the next 45 minutes taking your calls. This is your chance to put any question you like to me, and indeed will have helping me, as ever, my friend Mr. Nick Ferrari, who's looking at me particularly beadily this morning. The numbers for you to get your questions on the air: 0345 6060 973, or email boris@lbc.co.uk, and you can watch it in high definition on the website. We go straight away to Colin in Northolt, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Can you tell me what way you're going to vote this evening?
Yes, I'm going to vote with the government and with the Prime Minister to support a limited and modest extension of what we're doing in Iraq and Syria. And the reasons I'm going to do that, Colin, are that first of all, I think we need to do something more to constrict Daesh, ISIL, whatever you want to call them, in that area. There's no question that they are plotting, and that those plots are having an effect, not just on other parts of Europe, but on Britain itself. We're aware of plots emanating from that part of the world. This is a clear and present danger to our country. If we can do something to wipe them out at source, to cut the head off the snake, as the Prime Minister puts it, then I think that should be supported. I also think that it is right in this context, when we have so many allies who are themselves taking military risks to achieve this end, that Britain should stand up and be counted, and that we should rank ourselves alongside the French, the Americans, the Turks and others.
Colin?
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, let me ask you a question. It's not going to be done solely from the air, is it, Mr. Mayor?
No, and I want to be very clear that I don't think any MP voting tonight will be embarking on this project with a sense of exuberant jingo or any particular optimism that anything can be accomplished quickly, or indeed that British airstrikes now will make a profound difference immediately to the course of what is happening. What we can hope to do is to have a bit more impact on those terrorist groups in that particular area, just as we already have had an impact in Iraq on the activities of Daesh. And they have been moved back quite some way. They've lost about 30% of their ground. And that is the intention. It cannot be done, Nick, and I'm sure you're about to come back on me and ask, it cannot be done without terrestrial support, without ground troops. And
so we will have to put British troops in.
And well, that means that the activities from the air have to be done in concert with ground troops that can take and occupy that territory.
Are you talking about British ground troops?
No, I'm not.
You're talking about the Free Syrian Army?
I'm talking about all forces that are anti-Daesh, as it were. And that could include the Syrian army, the existing Assad Syrian army. It could include members of the Al-Qaeda affiliate, the Al-Nusra Front, for heaven's sake.
Goodness me, how would you hold this alliance together, Mr. Mayor?
What would, in an ideal world, what you would want to see is the non-Daesh elements, Syrian army, the rebels, so-called, the Free Syrian Army, the so-called moderate rebels, of whom there are supposed to be about 70,000, though we don't really know.
Do you believe that figure?
I'm sure it's contested, but, there are a substantial number, whatever figure you...
Well, some say it might be half that number.
Suppose it's half that number. Whatever it is, imagine if those could somehow lay down their arms against stop their quarrel with the Assad government pro tem, as part of a package for the eventual removal of Assad.
Isn't this?
Well, this is the process that is going on in
Well, who's going to broker that?
Well, it's currently being negotiated in the peace talks in Vienna. And if you say to me, Nick, this is something that will be very difficult to pull off, and I can't really see how this is going to happen, I'd have to say, yes, it is difficult. And you look at Syria, it is a nightmare. The whole place the map of Syria now is a sort of tiny Bantustans of territory occupied by one groupuscule or another. And it's a tragedy. it's a writhing bag of snakes. And yes, of course, it's going to be very, very difficult. But there is a political process going on in Vienna, and I think it's very important that Britain, which has a great set of fantastic diplomats, fantastic foreign service, great experience in the region. It was, after all, Britain that created the very borders of Iraq and Syria, called those states into being, effectively. We have tremendous experience. We should be at the table and helping to broker that political solution in tandem with trying, in a very restricted way, to step up the military pressure on Daesh.
And are those who oppose the bombing terrorist sympathisers, Mr. Mayor?
No, I don't think that is the case necessarily. I think there will be many, many people
Mr. Cameron thinks they are.
Who have... I don't think the Prime Minister said that. I think that what the Prime Minister...
As saying that.
Well, I think what the Prime Minister was saying was very clear. He was referring to some people who, by unfortunate choice of language, have seemed to confer legitimacy.
Mr. Cameron told the 1922 committee that Corbyn and his allies were terrorist sympathisers.
Well, that I'm afraid is a shorthand account of what the Prime Minister... I heard what the Prime Minister said.
Well, so you can tell us, what did he say? Did he use those two words?
He did, as to the best of my recollection, but he was referring not to all people who oppose the war, but to some people who who oppose the bombing, I should say, but to some people who, by what I can only call a disastrously infelicitous choice of language, have seemed to confer not only legitimacy, but also as if to partly to excuse the actions of those who have murdered people in this city. And I think
are you referring to the remarks by Ken Livingstone, your predecessor?
To say, for instance, that foreign policy disputes or British foreign policy controversies over what we have done in the past can be called a quote-unquote cause in which people have quote-unquote laid down their lives.
Well, this is Ken Livingstone's words, your predecessor.
Yes, and that is to use the language of the terrorists themselves and in many ways to play their game.
So Livingstone was wholly wrong when he said that.
I think he was. I think it was most sad and surprising that he chose those words, because I do think that it I do think it not only sought to, as it were, explain terrorism, and I think drew a false analysis, but also in the minds of many impressionable listeners, it would have given the impression that he was, as it were, justifying or excusing those murders, that action. And that, I think, is completely...
But he would say it was a result of British foreign policy. He indeed laid the blame fair square at Tony Blair's door. How fair was that?
Well, I think that is wrong. I think
Tony Blair had the intelligence. He knew, and he decided to act against it, according to Livingstone. What's
so interesting about so many of these post hoc justifications for terrorism, or after the event justifications, is actually they take place after the foreign policy intervention, which they are, before the foreign policy intervention, which they are supposed to be in response to. And I give you the classic example is 9/11. What was that about? It was, what we have is a huge number of people around the world, and alas, a growing number of people who are actuated by a cruel, nihilistic ideology, and it plays their game to allow them the excuse and the justification that this is something to do with foreign policy, with Israel, Palestine, with the Iraq War, or whatever. That is beside the point. It is playing their game. It is using their language. It is advancing their cause. And that is what the Prime Minister meant. And I have to say, I think he was making an extremely good point.
Mr. Johnson, we move on.
Thank you. Can we go to Anita now in Sutton?
Good morning, Boris.
Good morning.
Always the diplomat, son of a diplomat, and you certainly know the words to say, but I don't believe at this time that we should be bombing Syria. I think we've got to, as another gentleman has said, we have to show the Syrian people that we are on their side. And I think the only thing to do now is to open a training camp, say in Cyprus, to train the Syrian people to attack these ISIS, and they have the the language, the land they know, and the desire to have their land.
Anita, I know there's another question you wanted to ask. I think we have covered that for now. Could I move you on to the other question that you told one of my team?
I think Anita's got a very good idea, by the way. I think we certainly should be helping.
To set these trends.
Yeah, Syria will one day be at peace. Syria will one day have a great future again. And to that end, we need to be helping them. And I think what actually we're doing in the region, Britain is the single biggest donor. We can be very proud of the stuff that we're doing with training, with the humanitarian effort that's been led by Justine Greening. There's a huge amount going on. I think what Anita is saying is by no means irrelevant.
Okay, but the other question you wanted to ask, Anita, briefly?
It's Turkey, yes. I think giving Turkey 3 million EU money, billion, yes, that's correct, and the telling the Turkey people, we'll give you free visas.
Yeah.
Yes, the Schengen zone. Anita, this is the idea that as a part of their work in handling the migrant crisis, they will get access to the Schengen-free zone in Europe. Your view on that, Mr. Mayor?
I think it's very important. One of the reasons, look, I don't think anybody, even though I'm a Turk, because you all partly Turkish.
Your grandfather is Turkish. You're not Turkish, I remind you. You were born in the US. You live in Britain, but you're not Turkish.
Okay, all right. I'm proud of my Turkish antecedents. No, but nonetheless, I think that it is crazy to imagine that you could have total free movement with Turkey, and that is just not something that this country is. I'm not on for it. This country's not on for it. You know, it's a massive.
Mr. Cameron
country.
is.
No, he's not, because
he's a huge fan of Turkey.
We're not part of Schengen.
He's talked about getting Turkey
into
the EU.
We're not part of Schengen, and I don't want to see. Now, actually, we had a conversation about this on this. Come on, Nick, you've got Alzheimer's. We had this only 2 weeks ago, or a month ago, whatever it was. We had a conversation about this very subject, and you said to me, "You're a great pro-Turk.
Yes.
Are you in favour of Johnny Turk arriving in huge numbers in Britain?" And I said, no, I'm not. I think that...
or even being in the Schengen.
And it's one of the reasons... No, absolutely not. And one of the reasons why I think that the whole border control issue is so live now in Europe, and there's no question in my mind that we're going to need to see some progress on that, and to find a way of restoring a bit more control. And looking at the French are restoring border controls.
Yes.
The Hungarians, loads of people.
Some of the Scandinavian countries.
Some of the Scandinavian countries. And I think until such time as the great immigration refugee crisis clears up, I think we're going to need to have national control. National control is what people want, and they're totally right.
We move
Alan
on.
in the city.
Alan in the city.
Good morning, Boris. This is your number one fan.
I mean, fantastic. Is that apart from Mr. Ferrari?
To my house next Monday and join me on the journey in from Essex through Lower Thames Street and the Embankment.
Oh, right.
And then you may realise that in future, when you give out these contracts, that you need to articulate them a little bit and understand what is actually going on there.
Yeah, Alan, I'm delighted to hear you. I think we've had lots of conversations about this, and I think, Alan, my recollection of, I think this is the noble and learned Lord Sugar.
It is. Who's just invited you to his home in Essex on Monday.
I'd love to, and thank you so much, Alan. Will
you allow Lord Sugar to drive you in on Monday?
I'll come if I possibly can. Just a couple of points, Alan. As I've said to you before, first thing is I apologise very much for the delay and inconvenience that you've been experiencing, along with many people coming in from Essex. And my friend Robert Halfon, the government minister, he's been absolutely voluble with me about this problem. I'm well aware of it, and what we are doing is moving as fast as we can to get the cycle superhighways done. It will be much better when it is done, Alan. I'm apologetic to you for the inconvenience that you're experiencing, but once we've got it done, I promise you will love it, and there will be a billiard table smooth cycle superhighway for you to zoom.
Lord Sugar, do you think you'll love it?
I think I fully understand what Boris is trying to do, and I do agree that we've got to try to avoid accidents occurring to cyclists. But, Boris, with the greatest respect, we need to spend more money on educating cyclists.
Yes, I agree with that.
And the thing is that you did have a scheme last year where there was a bunch of police I saw in Hyde Park inviting people to come along and be advised about things, what to do. Cyclists think about coming into London to save money, to be fit and all that stuff, but They don't know. Some of them just do not understand.
Alan, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing with you for a minute. And you're right to point out to Operation Safeway we've been running. We run it actually intermittently. Sometimes the cops. In fact, they were out in force this morning. I saw along Holborn trying to. They had a bike theft initiative going there. They do get you now if you jump the lights. So we really try to find people if you get on the pavement, if you frighten pedestrians, if you behave irrationally with motorists. We try and zap you as a cyclist. We come down very, very hard. I think we've dished out 40. I mean, in the first burst of Safeway, we had 14,000 penalty notices issued, the vast majority of them to cyclists. And indeed, and it's one of the reasons why I get flack from cyclists as well as from everybody else, because they feel that we're now being too tough.
Well, I mean, I've been told to shut up in the House of Lords a couple of times by insisting that cyclists have to have some form of identification on them, because, effectively...
Well, you speak. Sorry.
They can't get nicked, because if they've got no identification on them, then how do you know who they are? Well,
you speak there for a great many motorists, and it's one of the things that's come up most regularly on this show, I think, over the last few years, is can't you give them blighters licenses? Can't they have numbers on their back? And
on their back,
the trouble with that is it is another, as you appreciate, you're fighter as you are against bureaucracy and red tape. It is another piece of regulation, another piece of legislation, very, very difficult to enforce, and it would actually, I think, lead to I don't know of any country in the world that does it or does it successfully.
America.
No, you can ride a bike in America. You can ride a bike in America without having a license.
If you break the rules there, you have to have a form of identification of you. And get this, the police will confiscate your bike from you there and then.
Well, no, that I'm in favour of. But in America, in America, don't forget, Alan. In America, don't forget that. And as far as I can remember, they shoot you for jaywalking. So I'm not, not going to. I don't think I'm necessarily going to.
Under what terms can someone have their bike confiscated? What's that for?
Well, at the moment,
what would you like to see?
I think I said. The other day in City Hall, in Mayor's Question Time, I'd be perfectly happy with an arrangement whereby people who jump the lights or terrified pedestrians by mounting the pavement and were apprehended by the law actually had their bicycles confiscated. In fact, I wouldn't mind if they were impounded and auctioned for charity or whatever. But that, I'm told, is an infringement of human rights and the expropriation of private property.
Final question,
and so on.
Lord Sugar, are you confident that when it is all done, when all the building is done and everything is complete and finalised, are you confident traffic will come back to a regular sort of flow, Lord Sugar, briefly?
Look, I've made myself very popular with most of the London taxi drivers recently, because my tweets, when I coming in, I get so frustrated there, and the London taxi drivers keep saying to me, "You give that Boris a bit of stick."
Well, I know. Well, can I tell you? Will you speak for many people? You speak for many people, and not just taxi drivers.
No,
and I apologise to them and to you.
The point is that I'm a bit of a technical bloke myself, and I'm looking at the construction that is being done in Lower Thames Street, and yes, there's going to be a superhighway for bikes, but that road has always been a terrible road to get through anyway, even before you started tinkering with it. It's one of the only ways in from the east, from the A13.
I know. Well, can I tell you something, Alan?
When it's all finished, it's going to be a big backlog of traffic still in the rush hour.
Well, it will be much better than it is now. And don't forget, there was a plan, I think, under the previous Labour mayor to close the whole thing and turn it into a kind of beach. So, things that, and Alan also. I mean, we had a wonderful conversation about this in the past, and you told me actually that one of your reasons for not taking the tube, which is a very efficient way of getting in from your part of the world, is that you're worried about being recognised, but you don't mind the rest of your family taking the tube. I think the tube is, it is a jolly good way of getting around if you're...
I agree 100% with you, 100%. I mean, mine's a personal issue, and that's really, not a problem for anybody. But yes, the tube is a great way of getting in. And my grandsons work in town.
All right.
6 o'clock in the morning, they get on the tube, they get to work, and they're happy bunnies.
One day soon, things will be better. I promise.
We'll put you in touch to see if we can persuade Boris, to be driven in one morning. Now, you may recall, Mr. Mayor, that part of the cycle superhighway was opened last month.
I do.
And LBC's political editor Theo Usherwood went and did some research. And he is a great man, young Theo. And he counted that, sadly, a lot of people were not using the cycle superhighway and were continuing to use the main road, and I've talked to you in the past about how it's not mandated. Well, last month, your cycling commissioner, Andrew Gilligan, disputed that report.
I think that report I just heard was a complete lie. I stood outside I stood in exactly the same place.
Well, I don't think Theo Usherwood would do that.
Yes, I think he is quite clearly lying. I think I stood in the same place as him yesterday and the day before and the day before that, and I observed about 95% of cyclists using the superhighway.
But why not 100? Well,
the numbers were sufficient. The numbers were significantly higher than he's saying. I counted with my own eyes 750 people using it in an hour.
Right, but why? Come back to my central point.
Every single minute.
Mr. Gilligan, coming back to my...
I need to deal with the fact that your reporter is a liar.
No, well, I don't think you should say he's a liar, and I would ask you again not to do that. You weren't physically standing beside him, and I'm starting to get a little bit angry about that suggestion, but whatever the percentage might be, why would you not mandated cyclists use the highway?
I'm sorry, your whole report is an absolute lie.
No, can you just come back to my question?
People are using the superhighway, they are using it in...
No, why aren't they... Why are they not mandated to use them?
The fact that they're not mandated to use a highway is completely irrelevant because...
No, Mr. Gilligan, it's not. We've spent tens of millions of pounds on an extraordinary setup for cyclists, which they don't have to use.
Pounds on that. We haven't spent tens of millions of pounds. We spent about 5 million.
The cycle superhighway across London is costing tens of millions of pounds, and there is no legal requirement for cyclists to use it. So I'll come back to my central point again. Why is it not made compulsory for cyclists to use that?
Because there's no need, because they all are using it.
Now, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Gilligan is your cycling commissioner. What was it on his CV that commended him for the job?
Well, Andrew is a passionate cyclist, and you've just heard some of the passion that he brings to this.
Well, I'm passionate about wining and dining. Can I be your restaurant czar? Is that all you need? Just passion?
No, because we don't need a restaurant czar.
Right.
We need people who are going to help us with cycling.
So what was it on his CV that commended him for the job?
Because he is, as I say, knows a huge amount about cycling in London and has done a terrific job of campaigning for better...
How many people were in the panel who interviewed him?
Provision. I honestly can't remember how many people were in the panel for interviewing. I suspect it was me, and it was a very...
How many other candidates were there?
0, as far as I can remember.
I see.
And, I'm being very straight with you. I think he's done a fantastic job. And
let's talk a little bit about this cycle superhighway. We went back the next day.
And he is he's a passionate campaigner, and he's done a fantastic job for cycling in London. And by the way,
that's not disputed.
Good. Because obviously... tempers run high when it comes to
tempers not running high at all.
Good, no, mine not.
We went back the next day.
I'm a model of calm and all these measures.
60% of cyclists were on the road or the pavement not using the cycle superhighway. We went back the following day.
People can bandy around
statistics.
I just while that long clip was running, I just had the opportunity to read a piece in The Guardian, which seemed where a chap went along and did the count and pretty much substantiates Andrew's version. But look, let's not quibble about statistics. I think the key question, and I think what Theo was driving at really is, because I talked to Theo on that very morning, that the key question is, are people, when people are coming, as it were, from south to north over Vauxhall Bridge, what are they doing? Are they going across the road to join the cycle superhighway, the new cycle superhighway, or are they simply turning left and continuing on the existing carriageway which is used by all the cars? And of course it is absolutely true, as Theo has said, and indeed I think as Andrew has conceded, that people going south-north are very largely, they're not all, simply continuing on the existing carriageway. Now I personally don't have a problem with that. Loads of people are also using, and more people now than ever, and using the cycle superhighway both directions on the other side of the road, but quite a lot of people are simply, because that's the natural thing to do. That's the desire line of the cyclist. And the question that you have to ask yourself as a libertarian and everything else is, would you insist?
Yes.
Would you have a policeman standing there saying to the cyclist, "Oi, you, right, cross the road,
Why have we
go
built
around that.
Why have we built the damn
Go
thing
around
then?
that." Well, I tell you what.
It might be in there. What did you say? Line of sight or desired line?
Desire
What about the
line.
Desire line. What about motorists?
Well, there's no way that they've been impeded by this. It's been
They've
brilliantly.
not been impeded by the cycles.
Well, they've been impeded by
lost
they've been impeded by the construction of it. Of that, I've apologised, but actually, we've been able to keep traffic flowing very smoothly, and it's the right thing to do. You know, how many times, Nick, have you and I sat in this studio and talked about the loss of some life in London to a cycling accident?
Yes.
And the pressure has been on every public body in London overwhelming to do something to make cycling safer. That's what we're trying to do. And it was really moving, actually, to talk to some people, mothers and children, on that day with Theo and others who were benefiting from that cycle superhighway and who felt much, much safer. That's what we want to achieve. If we can do it without excessively penalising valuable motorists like Lord Sugar, then that has got to be the right way forward for the city. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Let's move on to other matters. We go to other callers.
Can we get Sarah in Epsom, please?
Boris, hello, good morning.
Good morning.
As I know, you're a fantastic opponent of Heathrow Airport, but if it was to get a new runway, there are going to be tens of thousands of people who will be overflown for the first time, and they probably are unaware of the problem of what awaits them. I was wondering what you think you should be doing in your last months as mayor to alert these people to what might be happening over their heads in due course, and how you think they should best be opposing it, because they're going to have narrow, concentrated flight paths, and they probably don't know they might be getting a plane overhead once every 90 seconds or so for hours and hours and hours, days after days.
That's entirely right, Sarah, and of course they don't know it and they don't realise it, and there's about 300,000 people we calculate who will be so affected, and that is completely contrary to the government's aviation noise policy. I mean, they've got a statutory policy on this, which is that there should not be substantial numbers of new people. Whatever you do with airports, you're not supposed to have new victims of aircraft noise. What they've done recently, actually, at Heathrow is send the planes over areas that, you know, where you actually, there were some MPs who were pretty kind of equivocal about having Heathrow nearby, and suddenly realising the noise impacts in Wokingham, in Bracknell, and that kind of area. It is really starting to tell. And Sarah is quite right. There will be not just parts of London, but other parts of the southeast that will be badly affected by aviation noise from a third runway. I've got to be honest with you. I'm the ancient mariner of this subject. I think it'd be very, very difficult to, if not impossible, to get this thing done. I think it's politically undeliverable. I think it's environmentally undeliverable.
We're going to have to go around the houses again, are we? Davis has already made the recommendation.
Well, I know, and I think, alas, he got it wrong. I think that I've always thought that we were on a sort of Via Dolorosa with this thing. Stations that we got to go through.
You want to put it in the estuary?
Got to go through various stages of agony and realisation.
Why do you want to put it in an estuary which has got a heavy amount of fog?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, the amount of fog
in the estuary. Of course, there's more fog over the river than there is
roughly the same in the Thames Valley as it is over the estuary.
There is more fog. Why would you build an airport where there's fog?
I can tell you, I've represented areas in the Thames Valley for a very long time, in one way or the other.
Well, hang on, I live on Blackheath. I can look down. I can see the fog. I know exactly how much fog.
Well, I know exactly how much fog there is in the West London too, and there's lots of fog there too. And it's.
What did you make lastly of the plain stupid demonstration last week that paralysed Heathrow Airport for a number of hours? Nobody can possibly condone demonstrations that paralyse the city, cause people to go bats, and look, I'm not in favour of that kind of direct action, but I would simply say that looking ahead, if we do pursue this option, that is, alas, the future. It is environmentally extremely destructive, and you can't expect people not to notice that, but that is in no way to excuse what is being done. More calls to Boris right after this. You listen to LBC 9:31 News with Lisa Aziz. It's Ask Boris here on LBC. Mr. Mayor, to those who say, as you approach the last Christmas in post, and to those who say you'll leave a legacy of a city crippled by your cycle superhighway and with a bridge, the Garden Bridge, that nobody wants, how would you reply?
Bridge?
How would you reply?
I would say that actually London's never been in a better economic condition. It's the number one financial, cultural, commercial scientific innovation media capital of Europe, if not the world, and things are broadly speaking going well. Yes, it has great challenges, but I think some of the things that you've mentioned are going to be fantastic in the future. I think the cycling revolution will be wonderful for the city. The Garden Bridge, and by the way, can I just say we are today announcing 13 new river crossings for London.
13,
3, and they're all in the TfL press release. But we're consulting particularly today on the proposed crossings, new bridges crossings at Galleons Reach and Belvedere. Though there are many others, and I'll give you an exclusive story for you, Nick, because I know you're a great follower of the Emirates airline.
These included in the crossings, are they?
No, it's not actually. But
cable cars out the Sound of Music that nobody wants.
You say that passenger numbers are up 4.6 on last year. 6.2 million journeys have taken. So,
13 river crossings.
And it has made it has made in the last year an operating surplus of £1 million. That is the only form of transport in this city. It is not only paying back its revenue.
When you say
costs,
13,
it is paying.
Are they all tunnels and bridges, or are some of these?
Like, see, I knew just ignore it. I knew just ignore it when I said the cable car.
Are these all tunnels and bridges?
Cable cars made.
No, I'll look into those figures later. Don't we? We've also got the big Hubba Bubba part, whatever, the shisha.
That's fantastic. I know. That's also fantastic.
Are these 13 all tunnels or bridges?
They are all tunnels or bridges.
How much is this going to cost?
Well, they will have to be done. Some of them by tolling, but don't forget, in the government's long-term economic plan for London, which I agree with George Osborne, there is a commitment by the government to 3 new crossings east of Tower Bridge. And we're spelling out
10 more west.
The rest of them will be funded either from tolling or from future financial instruments that we will raise, tax increment financing and other means.
Well, where are the other 10 going?
I'll read them out, shall I?
Yes, I'd like. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. In ascending order, sort of top of the bridges. Here we go.
Okay. Here we go. The potential river crossings, including connecting the capital and their stage of development, are the Diamond Jubilee, so that cycle bridge linking this is
a cycle bridge.
West to east. Okay, west to east. Wait. Cycle bridge from Fulham to Battersea. Crossrail 2, that will go a crossrail link from Victoria and Clapham Junction. Vauxhall 9 Elms to Battersea, a pedestrian cycle bridge. Got the Garden Bridge, which you've already mentioned. North London to the Isle of Dogs, a passenger ferry. A Silvertown Tunnel.
About the same as reading the phone book out.
How will you ask for it?
Well, no, I see some of them are cycle bridges. Now I see how you're doing it.
Passenger ferry at Charlton.
They're like pontoons put in by the sappers.
A new rail line. No, some of them are huge bridges.
No, I appreciate it.
Crossrail, a new rail line linking Woolwich with Custom House. Galleons Reach, a huge bridge. Riverside, Barking Riverside to Thamesmead.
I'm beginning to regret. If only this programme was edited.
A multimodal crossing connection between Belvedere and Raynham.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, let's take another call. Here we go, sir. Thank you.
Okay, go. I thought let's go to Paul in Bracknell, please.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul. Your question to the Mayor, if you would.
The facts,
good morning, Mr. Mayor. Sir. Thank you for taking my call.
Not at all.
Yeah. Maybe return to the Chancellor's autumn statement.
Sir.
I have no doubt you will concur with me, a memorable occasion and at times sublimely effective, allaying the fears on his own backbenches and a nervous Home Secretary Theresa May. Money for the police to keep us safe. Tax credits cancelled. Also, Her Majesty's opposition front bench in complete meltdown.
Got to move you to your question. What is your question, Paul?
And here's my question. Would you agree with me that this Chancellor must be the next PM for the United Kingdom?
Paul, I would say that thankfully we have a Prime Minister who is doing a wonderful job at the moment, and long may he continue to do so. And there is no vacancy for that position.
As and when there is, I'm sure there will be a multitude of candidates. And I would not, Paul, the last thing I would want to do for any candidate, no matter how meritorious, would be to blight his or her chances by offering my endorsement, no matter how qualified. Paul, thank you for that. Mr. Mayor, you'll be aware of the sad news today. There's been another stabbing in London. This is a 17-year-old boy in Finsbury Park, fatal stabbing. He's the 15th teen to be fatally knifed in London this year. Those figures, you'll be aware more probably keenly than any of us, are starting to rise to the grim figures we saw 3 or 4 years ago. What action will be taken?
They are very sad news, and there's no question that knife crime is it's a perennial scourge. It's not something.
You seem to have the numbers going down. They're coming back up again, worrying.
And you're completely right, Nick. And I saw the Kinsella parents the other day, and we were talking about the tragedy of their loss of their son. And, all these tragedies are individually appalling for the families concerned, and it is, and there's no question it's something that
am I right to think knife crime is increasing then, Mr.
Well, you're not quite right, actually, because, the knife crime figures actually show substantial reductions certainly on 8 years ago. There's been considerable falls in knife crime overall, but what you've got is a persistent, I'm afraid, a persistent toll of young people who are losing their lives to knife crime. The answer is to step up, I think, the stop and search, and the Met are doing a little bit more of it, provided it's done sensitively and in accordance with the law. I think that's fine. I've got no problem with stop and search.
That's the reason,
and get the message across to people who are so mad as to carry knives that they will be done for.
But you have to tell the Home Secretary.
And you remember the Enfield law is now in. So
this is the Nick
Dubois law. Yeah. So that if you are caught carrying a knife twice, then you face a custodial sentence.
But doesn't Theresa May need to be persuaded of the benefits of stop and search?
No, it's an operational matter for Sir Bernard Hogenhower, and he's taken the decision to
ignore the Home Secretary.
Do more. Well, I don't think that. I'm not certain that you're accurately characterising her position on this. I think we're all agreed that stop and search, if it's done politely, and without not being oppressive, can be part of the solution, and it's. But I just want to reassure you and reassure our listeners, Nick, that overall the figures on knife crime are moving in the right direction, have moved in the right direction over a long period. But there is a persistent problem with gangs and with knives, and kids have got to know if they carry a knife when they go out and they are caught, they risk a custodial sentence.
Last one is a text question. Rachel and Bexley, what did Boris Johnson know about the Tatler Tory scandal?
I only knew what I read in the papers, and
do you know Mark Clark?
I've met. I understand that whenever this subject comes up on Newsnight, they show a long tracking shot of me and Mr. Clark. Though I must confess to you, I don't recollect any long conversations with.
Do you mean him or the Mr. Johnson, Elliot, who took his life? I think that's the shot they use, isn't it? The young man. Yes, that's the shot they use.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mark Clark is like the organiser, who's currently, I think, suspended from the party.
I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I haven't seen this myself. No. I'm sorry.
But
I got that wrong.
What should happen with Mr. Clark? Indeed, what should happen with Lord Feldman?
Well, there's as I understand it, there's an investigation now going to be carried out by.
Is this a picture of the Conservative Party you recognise? Harassment, bullying?
No, frankly,
blackmail.
It isn't. And, all I can say is that to the best of my knowledge, we never had anything like this on any of the London campaigns. And I think it's certainly not something that Andrew Feldman, who I know well, would have any time for at all. I can't imagine him condoning conduct of this kind.
And what of Mark Clark, who I say again denies the allegations, but he is alleged to have presided over this.
I've got to admit, he's a bit of a mystery to me. I mean, he's not someone who's I've come across very much.
All right. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you.
It falls just to wish you, I suppose I won't see you again before Christmas. So
well, happy Christmas.
And
fantastic.
Christmas
and
all
absolutely.
Thank you indeed.
And then don't forget the cable car made £1 million profit.
And don't forget the Hubba Bubba pipe, which nobody visits.
Not on the terms that are currently being offered. No, I don't. I listened to the Prime Minister yesterday. He seemed to be saying the main reason that we had to bomb Syria was that the Americans and the French are bombing Syria, so we must be...